welcome to this second edition of our podcast version of our show, Hall Pro for Pirate TV. I'm your host, Liam Plate, and I am joined by my panel, Louie Pasculli and Jonathan Heite. And guys, before we get into talking pro sports, how are you guys doing?
I'm doing great, Liam. It's good to be here. Good to be talking about all the sports that are going on right now. So I'm excited.
I am doing well as well. Louie and Liam, a lot to talk about, especially the three major sports, and just a lot to break down. I'm excited to do with you guys.
I'm excited too, and getting into this this early baseball season too. Baseball starting, NBA's closing up, getting close to playoffs, and the NFL draft is coming up as well. So a lot of questions to be answered. But first, we're going to take a look at the MLB, and the Yankees have started out decently. They currently have a 3-4 record as we're recording, and currently third in the AL East. So, just for starters, what do you guys think of how they started out the season?
Yeah, so far, I know the Yankees, it's just been inconsistent, batting with runners in scoring position. We've seen solid, some of the pitchers. Obviously, Garrett Cole's been there. Jordan Montgomery pitched well, Jameson Taillon. But again, there's still some like a Corey Kluber and a Domingo Germán who's still shaking off the rust a little bit, especially Corey Kluber. But again, it's so hard to really dictate how these teams are at this stage in the season, especially since it's 162 games. I just really looking for them for runners in scoring position, especially to really start to pick up on that. Today they got shut out by the Rays, but it's encouraging to see Gary Sanchez play well. He had back-to-back home runs to start off the season. But again, if they can't solve just the home run or bust mentality of whether they're going to strike out so many times, they really got to fix that if they want to make some noise this season.
Like you said, John, it's really early into the season, so it's really hard to get a good look at the team so far. But I've been a little bit unimpressed with how they've played. They lost, like you said, they lost 2 games to the Tampa Bay Rays. And I feel like if you're the Yankees, those are 2 games that you really want to have, especially early on in the season, because you want to get the team going. You want to get those wins under your belt as early as possible. And they also lost a few games to the Blue Jays. So that's also not good if you're the Yankees. And you mentioned the pitching and how they're doing well. I think that they're a little bit overhyped coming into the season. Garrett Cole is obviously one of the best pitchers in the American League. I don't think he'll have a problem this season. But I think as a whole, and the staff as a whole with Montgomery and Germán, and even Germán today, he didn't pitch as well as people would have liked him to. I think that might be a little bit of a struggle going forward into the season. So that's something to look out for. But as of right now, they're third in the East, the AL East, that is. Little bit concerned. It's the Yankees. They're always good, right? I think they're going to be fine, but I don't think they're going to be the top of the top as they normally are this season. I think they're going to take a little minor step back, and there's a team in their division who I think can rival them, but I'll get into that later. But yeah, the Yankees, I think, are I'm a bit concerned with them. I think they're going to be fine because, like I said, they are the Yankees, but I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back.
Yeah, I definitely think that they're still going to have a good year because they have a very good team and they'll be successful still. But obviously not the way you want to start out, especially losing to the Rays. In those first in those couple of games, and that's especially a team you want to take down. They were one of the World Series teams last year, and that you want to kind of show out for them. Show out in front of them and show that you can compete with the best, and that it should have been you in the World Series last year instead of them. So it's definitely gonna be interesting. I think Garrett Cole's he'll clean it up. The whole team probably will. I think it's interesting that you guys brought up the kind of home run or bust mentality, which is definitely something we've seen with the Yankees because they have a lot of strong hitters, and I definitely think that's something they're gonna have to work on. You got to take stuff baby steps. You can't always get the big play, but looking at so we're gonna move down from Queens to from the Bronx to Queens, actually going to the Mets. And, their first series with the Nationals was canceled due to COVID, problems with the National side, of course. And then they now sit at second in the NL East. I believe they're now 2-3 as they lost today, the day we're recording. But guys, just in general, what are your thoughts on the Mets' young season so far?
Dismay, anger, all of the above, it seems like. We've already seen 2 absolute gems from Jacob deGrom, and it's 2 games the Mets have lost. It's the story of Jacob. It's really unfortunate. He never gets run support. And I really thought that this year the Mets were going to be able to provide some bats. On paper, they have a really good lineup. They got Alonso, they have Dom Smith batting, and obviously the trade for Francisco Lindor. That was huge for the Mets to get him on the lineup, both defensively at shortstop and in the lineup for batting. But we've already seen 2 games where DeGrom has pitched really well, and the Mets just haven't been able to do the work that's needed at the plate. I mean, even today, he pitched 8 complete innings, gave up 1 run, and then the bullpen gave up 2 runs in that 9th inning, which is really unfortunate for Jacob DeGrom. So, and again, it's early into the season. I'm hoping for the Mets' sake, and even just for Jacob DeGrom's sake as a pitcher, the Mets will be able to straighten this out and provide him with some run support. But this early into the season is really not looking good for them. I mean, I think that they're going to win some games. I think that they're going to be competitive in the NL East, but that's the batting is really what they're going to have to focus on. So I'm hoping for DeGrom they can turn it around.
Yeah, I agree, Louie. Again, it seems like every year, especially the past couple of years, we've been really hyped up about the Mets because they've been adding these offensive pieces that they usually have not had. Pete Alonso on his rookie year tear and Francisco Lindor. And I just think overall, again, they need to get the momentum started at some point in the season because, again, it's not like last year where you really had to get hot early on and kind of make sure you were consistent throughout that shortened season. This year, we kind of knew they maybe weren't going to start off as strong as they sometimes are, especially because there's a lot of growing pains between getting Francisco Lindor fully assimilated in this Mets culture, this Steve Cohen culture. But again, I'm so far with him. The offensive numbers haven't really been there. He's batting like low 200, but it's the stuff besides the offense that he really brings to the table. His superb play at shortstop. Even today, his first at-bat against the Marlins, he bunted for a single. So he's not always just going to hit home runs, such as like the Yankees, where some of these players like a Giancarlo Stanton, you're really just relying on it to put the ball in the bleachers. I just think this Mets team is different than previous years. Because even we saw with that opener, even though Michael Conforto did clearly lean in to that hit by pitch for them to get a walk-off. That was pretty obvious. That was still, a home opener win. It got New York excited. I think New York baseball is at the top it's been in a long time. When the Subway Series happens this year, it's going to be, DeGrom and Cole going back and forth. And there's the offenses, if both of them are turned on, are going to be exciting. But I just think the Mets have a much better team they've had. I like Taijuan Walker. He pitched well in his first start. Marcus Stroman's back after an absence from last year. But again, I think the Mets, it's going to be an interesting year for them. And with Steve Cohen at the helm, it's just only a bright future ahead.
Yeah, I definitely think this is one of the better Mets teams that we've seen. And the Mets, as of recent, have had a lot of hype around them that they could possibly go to the playoffs this season. But the one thing, and you guys both touched on it, get Jacob DeGrom some run support. I mean, come on, he's pitching such good, like he'll pitch a great 8 innings and then he comes out and the closer comes in, but he's and then they can't close the game. First of all, they let up a couple more runs and then he's not getting run support. I just think that the offense really needs to step it up if the Mets want to kind of live up to that expectation of possibly making the playoffs. I mean, they have 2 wins so far, one over the Phillies and the other over the Marlins. So, I mean, and the Phillies team that I think could be good this year and it's all off to a hot start. But I think that the run support needs to be there. The offense needs to be there. It's really just, it's I don't know. You have one of the best pitchers in the league and possibly to ever play baseball. And you can't even get him run support. I think that's the biggest problem and my biggest pet peeve with watching the Mets. But kind of looking over at the rest of the league, we touched on the 2 New York teams. You have the Yankees and the Mets. Both have big expectations this year. But I mean, thus far in this season, what's another team that you've been impressed with?
So it's always interesting each year to see the teams that are kind of like towards the bottom, the previous season and see them jump up. But there's always been a team, no matter how good or bad they are, I've always followed. And this year especially I've followed. And not just because they've gotten a lot of national attention, but it's the Los Angeles Angels. And it's, again, if Mike Trout is playing, it's literally must-watch TV. And it's a shame that he's out all the way, on the West Coast where he doesn't get as much of that Nashville attention if he played for a Yankees or a Mets or even like a Dodgers, and he plays so late at night sometimes, the Angels. That team, he's been on that team now for, I forgot the exact amount of years. But he really, again, he's a once-in-a-lifetime type of player, Mike Trout. And now he's got surrounded by Shohei Ohtani, who, again, I like to compare him. The good comparison with Shohei Ohtani is like this, how House of Highlights and ESPN covers Zion Williamson and LaMelo Ball. That's kind of how the MLB's been covering him because there's nothing like him right now where he's throwing 100 miles an hour while also hitting 400-foot bombs for home runs. So I think this Angels team's a lot of fun to watch. They're 6-2 right now. Again, the season is so early, so young. We really don't know how it's going to be dictated over 160 games. But again, this is actually a really good team with a lot of good mix of veterans and young players. Albert Pujols, again, Trout, Ohtani, and Jared Walsh each have 3 home runs apiece already, above 25 RBIs. Their offense is clicking. A problem in previous years has been the pitching for the Angels, getting a steady source of pitching and defense. But you just got to hope in the next couple of years, if Mike Trout can't get it solved with the Angels, he's got to make a playoff run eventually in his career, because he's just too good of a player to just, every single year not make it to the playoffs, because they haven't been back since 2014. So it'd be interesting to see.
I totally agree with you, and it's a great take, and it's really funny how you mentioned Mike Trout, because just the other day I gave a presentation in my oral communications class about how Mike Trout deserves the money he's being paid, even though it's out of proportion. He deserves that kind of money. So
Absolutely.
That's a great take by you, John. But for me, I got to go with the Toronto Blue Jays, and I think that they're going to really do well this season. The Toronto Blue Jays have a really young team. I mean, at shortstop, they have Bo Bichette and then Biggio at third base. And also, obviously, Vlad Guerrero Jr. goes without saying, first base, huge bat for them. I mean, the son of Vlad Guerrero Sr., and he's going to be really good this season. I have a lot of faith in the Blue Jays. Plus, former Met Steven Matz is part of that pitching staff. I'm looking forward to see how he's going to do this season. But I think the Blue Jays could rival the Yankees in that division. I mean, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I really think that it's possible for them to potentially overtake them. If we see the Yankees really not be on their game, their pitching staff falters too much, and their hitting is just strikeout or home run, and it doesn't seem to work out for them, and I think this is a Blue Jays team that we could see overtake them in the division.
Yeah, I think both solid picks. I think with the Angels, I want Mike Trout to be in the playoffs, man. I want him. I want to see him in postseason baseball. I want to see him make a run at the World Series. I'd love to see that. And then the Blue Jays, I do think I agree. I think they could definitely give the Yankees a run for their money. But a team that I think could also give a team another rival in their division a run for their money is the San Diego Padres. I think that they can definitely give the Los Angeles Dodgers a run for their money. Right as of right now, the Dodgers are 6-2 and the Padres are 5-3, so they're not far behind, even though it is just only a couple series in for both these teams. But I do think they've been very impressive, and I think this is a team that everyone should watch out for. I think they're gonna make the playoffs, and I think that they have a good shot at getting getting to the NLCS and possibly rivaling that Dodgers squad. And I definitely think that they will put together a good season. But let's move on here over to the NBA, and looking at the Eastern Conference, starting with the Brooklyn Nets here, for the one New York team, with the Sixers losing to the Pelicans on Friday night. The Brooklyn Nets have slid into the first place spot in the East. So much to my dismay, that the Nets are now in first place. But I think this is going to be a very tight race all the way to the playoffs. And guys, at the end of the day, who do you think ends up winning the race for first?
Honestly, I think the Sixers will be able to pull it out towards the end of the season and get back into that first place position. Even though KD is back for the Nets, I think the Sixers have just been playing super well. But to me, it doesn't really matter who's first place in the East. Those are the best 2 teams. Those are the teams that we're going to see in the conference final when that time rolls around. So I don't think it really matters to me. I mean, it's going to be one of those 2. But I think it's going to be more about if the Nets can play defense against really good teams in the playoffs. That's what I'm going to look forward to, more so than who finishes first in the division. The Nets have arguably the best offense of all time and the worst defense of all time. So I don't know how that's going to fare in the postseason. I don't know if they're going to be able to just win only using offense. I mean, this old saying goes, offense wins games, but defense wins championships. And I think we're going to see that in play with the Nets come this postseason. So even though I mean, I think the Sixers will overtake them again for first place in the East. It might be the Nets for first place in the East. We'll just have to wait and see. But I'm looking forward to seeing the Sixers overtaking the Nets in the postseason because of the lack of the Nets defense.
Yes, I know you guys both mentioned the Sixers. I'm going to be a little bit different with my pick. I personally think the Nets will still be the 1 seed coming out of the East. But like you said, Louie, and Liam, you alluded to it, I personally don't know if they can still go all the way. And the regular season, again, does not dictate what is going to happen come playoff time. And again, we've seen, again, with the Nets, Kyrie, KD coming into the season, it was just them two, and it almost became unfair when they added, James Harden. Even though LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin are ex All-Stars, they were still All-Stars at one point. They will score if the NBA quarters were longer, they'd score 200 points in a game, like with the amount of offense they have, and they're going to outscore, I think, a lot of the teams down the stretch. They do have I'm not going to say an easy schedule, but they do have, a medium schedule compared to the Sixers. Sixers also kind of have around the same strength of schedule. But again, like the Nets play like the Timberwolves on Monday. They're going to win games like that. There's still a lot of teams that the Nets can still beat, especially with KD coming back. And you saw how efficient he was. I think he was a perfect percentage from three his first game back after that injury. But again, I don't personally know if the Nets can win the championship this year. Again, like you alluded to about the defensive struggles. In the playoffs, I like the Sixers. Again, I think Ben Simmons could be the defensive player of the year. I think Joel Embiid is a possible MVP candidate. I know we're going to debate that in a couple of minutes, who should be the MVP. But I think in a 7-game series, I think it could be different. But to finish off the regular season, I still think the Nets are going to have enough wins to just still take the number 1 seed, whether that means anything or not, when it comes down to the playoffs.
I definitely think it's going to be close. I think I'll probably give the edge to the Nets simply because I like that point you made, how they're just going to win those cherry pick games on their schedule. And if the Sixers are dropping games to teams like the Pelicans, I mean, I think that's also a big thing. But looking, I think it's probably more important for the Sixers to get that home court advantage simply because they're a better team at home. They're very good at home. They're one of the best home teams in the league. So I think that's going to be important for them to get that. But as far as the Nets championships hopes go, I don't know if I see them get. I think essentially they're building this team to beat LeBron. I think that's really it. But I don't know if how far I see them going. It's definitely going to be Sixers Nets in the conference finals, but just a matter of who can win 4 games first. But now we're going to take a look at the bottom side of the playoff picture, down with the New York Knicks now in 8th place in the East currently. And do you think they can keep this up and secure a playoff spot for the first time since 2013?
So, Liam, I think it's going to be an absolute crime if the Knicks do not make the playoffs after this season they're having. And coming from a Knicks fan, it has just been so amazing to see Tom Thibodeau completely change the culture of the Knicks, because the Knicks have not been this good, again, since the Carmelo Anthony days. And this team has just so much chemistry. Julius Randle, all-star. RJ Barrett, an impressive sophomore year season. He's been playing phenomenal. Again, the team is just across the board. They just have so much chemistry. It's not even so much the talent. They're a gritty defensive team. And if they sneak in maybe as an 8 seed, again, it's going to be hard again in the playoffs because the East is loaded. But if they get matched up against the Nets in a 7-game series, I'm not going to say the Knicks are going to win. That's just an unbelievable statement to say. I don't believe it, even as a Knicks fan. But I think they can easily give the Nets a run for their money in this potential rivalry that's finally building, because the Nets have been so dominant against the Knicks for so many years now, the last couple of years. Again, Emmanuel quickly's been phenomenal. Another rookie. Derrick Rose, amazing acquisition during the regular season by Tom Thibodeau, bringing back, the ex-MVP. And just overall, this is a good defensive team. And I found a stat today. They're actually 6th in the NBA in 3-point percentage. And they have like 7 or 8 players shooting almost 40% from 3, which not a lot of people talk about when you're thinking of the Knicks. You just think of the defense. And again, I just hope that they can potentially play the Nets in a playoff series, because that'd be so much fun to watch.
Yeah, John, I got to echo everything you just said because I completely agree with it. I think the Knicks will be in the playoffs this year. It might be an 8 seed, but they're going to be in the playoffs. And another thing we have to look at is just how close the East is. I mean, there's only 2 or 3 games that separates like 4th from 8th. So there's a really good chance that the Knicks can go on a streak, win 3, 4, 5 games, and be sitting at 6th in the East. And that'll be perfectly fine for them. I also would love to see a Knicks-Nets playoff series. I think New York will be bumping for that. That'd be really awesome to see. And I was concerned with Thibodeau's his rapport with the young players, because going into this year, some people had concerns with him and how he was going to treat the young players, but he's done just a fine job, as you mentioned, John. And I agree with you. I do think that the Knicks will be in the playoff spot.
I definitely think the Knicks are going to make the playoffs. I think they've definitely built a good young core there and a good young team. I'm a big Derrick Rose fan, so I love seeing him play basketball again at a high level. And I think Tom Thibodeau has done a great job there. And it definitely will be cool to see Nets-Knicks first round. I think that'd be interesting. But like Louie said, it's so close. Any team can really move. But very quickly, we're going to have one last point here we're going to talk about. So as the season's coming down to an end, close to the playoffs, guys, who's your MVP pick? Who's the most valuable player for their team?
Well, Liam, for me, I got to go with the front runner, Nikola Jokic. I always mess up his name. Regardless, he's the front runner. He's my MVP. I don't care how you say his name. I think he's going to win the award. He's averaging a double-double, 26.3, 10.9 points, and then rebounds. That's astonishing for me. The only knock that you could think of for Jokic is that, there we go, I said it right, is that he's on the Denver Nuggets, whereas if you want to go like James Harden, which I don't know if he's even in the running right now, but Joel Embiid is a better example for the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers might very well win the East, but the Denver Nuggets are not going to win the West. So that's the only thing I can think of. But as of right now, Jokic has been so consistent this year, and he's played at such a high level for basically the entire year. I got to go with Jokic.
Yeah, I know a little bit to Liam's dismay, but I'm also going to go with Nikola Jokic. And I think a big part when you think of judging the MVP award each and every year, and I'm dating back to like when Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Giannis, it's consistency. And again, the Nuggets did not start off the season as hot as they usually do, but they established themselves as one of the best offensive teams in the entire NBA with that trio of Jokic, Jamal Murray. They've been so dominant. But we have to realize that Nikola Jokic is one of the best passing big men already, I think, in NBA history. His vision is insane. He's 2 assists, I believe, away from averaging a triple-double on the season, which he'd only be like the 3rd NBA player to ever do that. Again, we saw like Russell Westbrook did it. But again, he's just so dominant on the floor. The Nuggets have been flourishing now with him for this entire season. I think they could still make a playoff run like we saw in the bubble a little bit last year. But a big part is consistency, and he's the definition of consistency. He's played so well. He had like 32 assists in like 3 games or something. Like his stats are impeccable as well, which is another criteria you can play into as a factor to giving the award out. But I think Nikola Jokic still, if he continues this momentum throughout the rest of the season, Joel Embiid getting hurt, I think did hurt him a little bit in his chances. If he didn't get hurt, I might have had a different answer because he's also been super, super consistent. He's been so dominant. Especially if Philly gets the 1 seed, you definitely got to look back and think that he could potentially have won the award. But I just think at this stage in the season and what we've seen, I think Jokic is going to run away with it.
Yeah, it looks like both of you guys going with Jokic. I do think Jokic is a viable candidate. As much as I would love to say Joel Embiid, I do think his injury hindered him in that running. I'd say before he's probably one of the most dominant players in the entire league, and I think the best center in the league. I just think that he's so no one can guard him in the NBA. No one can. But then looking at it, I kind of want to bring up Luka Doncic. I think he's really a good candidate. I think he really brings a lot to the Mavericks, and not saying Jokic doesn't. Jokic brings a lot to the Nuggets, but if you take Luka off the Mavs, it's kind of like they're not that good. At least I don't think so. He's averaging 28.5 points per game. He's shooting 37% from 3. He's averaging 8.2 rebounds per game along with 8.7 assists. I just think he does a lot for this team, and that it's definitely, I think, going to be a tough competition between Luka and Jokic. But for the sake of this, I'm going to go with Luka, just so to go against the grain with you guys a little bit. But that'll wrap up our NBA talk, and now we're going to head over to the NFL draft here just coming up towards the end of April. And, it's pretty certain that Trevor Lawrence is going to go number 1 overall to the Jaguars, but the New York Jets, another local team, have the number 2 pick. And there's been a lot of talk that Zach Wilson is going to be the next quarterback of the New York Jets. So guys, is it a lock that Zach Wilson will be a New York Jet at number 2?
So I see Louie shaking his head, so he's probably going to counter me. But I'm not personally a Jets fan. I am a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. But what I've seen from how things have been going lately and how his stock's been rising, I still think Zach Wilson will be a Jet, especially with the trade of Sam Darnold to Carolina. I still believe he still could. At BYU, it's so hard to tell from a school like that when we really don't see him as much and seeing the competition that he plays against. But one thing that always stuck out to me if I've seen any film of him is how versatile he is when he's throwing like out of the pocket. Almost, I'm not gonna say Patrick Mahomes-esque, that's a stretch. But the way he moves in and out of defenders when he's throwing on the run, even during his pro day, it was so impressive. I think the Jets could use someone who's energetic, can run around, can fly around and throw the ball accurately and down the field. I just still think he's going to be the number 2 pick. I just don't think Justin Fields, who we've been talking about to be the number 2 pick for so long, is going to be a better quarterback than the NFL. I could be wrong, but we've seen a lot of red flags with Fields. But I'm interested to see what you have to say, Louie, about. I think you're a Jets fan, so who do you think they're going to pick?
I am a Jets fan, and it's just unfortunate because I'm being forced to agree with you, John, about how Wilson is going to be a Jet. The only thing I don't like is Zach Wilson. I would rather have Fields. I think his intangibles outweigh any red flags. I mean, he also has toughness. We saw in the Clemson game, he got hit in the ribs and still played. He played really well and at a high level after taking that massive shot. And to me, I would rather have Justin Fields than Zach Wilson, because I think Zach Wilson's draft stock rose after he was done playing. Like, everyone in the offseason got together and was like, okay, we're going to hype up this guy way too much. And then everyone else agreed. And I was so confused as to why it was even being talked about. I mean, it kind of reminds me of Carson Wentz, how he came from a very small school in I believe it was North Dakota. And yeah, he had one good year, but now he's not even on the team that drafted him just 4 years ago. So I'm a bit concerned. I do think the Jets are going to take him because that's the direction that everyone is saying. And as you said, they traded Darnold, so they're going to take a quarterback. And it looks like from the reports, it's going to be Zach Wilson. I just personally could talk an entire episode about how I don't think he should be going to number 2 overall, but I'm not in the GM or the front office of the New York Jets. So I think it's going to be Wilson, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's a lock at this point. The Jets are taking Zach Wilson at number 2. I do agree with you, Louie. I think Zach Wilson's draft stock has risen a lot after the season. Like, even during the season, everyone clowned BYU for not wanting to play teams and stuff like that. And now Zach Wilson's going to be like the next great quarterback. I do think, I don't know, I think Justin Fields is also a good option at number 2, but I do think it's a lock at this point for Zach Wilson. But we've been talking a lot about young quarterbacks, so I do want to get your opinion on something and that we could talk about. There are a lot of talented quarterbacks in this draft. So who are your top 5 QBs of the 2021 NFL draft class?
So for me, I think it's Trevor Lawrence, then a space, and then the rest of the quarterback class. I mean, this is the best quarterback that we've seen since Andrew Luck in 2012. I think that his college career says so for himself. And I feel bad that I'm going to keep roasting Zach Wilson, but everyone was so impressed with his pro day. They were so happy that he was able to throw the ball 40 yards. And now, if Trevor Lawrence had a poor pro day, would that impact his draft stock at all? No, not at all, because of his college career. We've seen how good he is. I think pro day is a little bit too overhyped as well, just the day itself in general. But regardless, for me, it's Trevor Lawrence at number 1. And if I had to put a quarterback at number 2, it would be Justin Fields, the guy that I want the Jets to take. He kind of reminds me of Russell Wilson in the sense that he's able to make plays in the pocket, but he also can extend the play and run around outside the pocket as well. Then I think number 3, it's got to be the guy that the Niners are going to take, Mac Jones from Alabama. He's not nearly as athletic as these other guys, but his pocket presence is amazing. And also, he has really good vision down the field. He's able to make throws that just from like standing in the pocket, being upright, just making the proper throw at the right time. And the Niners don't even need him to do that much. I mean, if you look at Garoppolo, he wasn't asked to break the passing record for every year. He just had to get the job done, kind of like Ryan Tannehill. I think he'll be a good fit there. And then number 4 and number 5 can kind of flip-flop it. It's Zach Wilson and Trey Lance for me. I mean, I already talked about Zach Wilson. I talked about the bad parts, but he does have some really good aspects. You compared him to Pat Mahomes, and I don't like the comparison, and I'm not going to make it, but he's really athletic, and he can throw the ball at different arm angles. And also, his arm strength is comparable, I say, Aaron Rodgers, because of just how strong he is in his arm. It makes those effortless throws look really easy. So for me, it's going to be he's at 4 or 5, and then Trey Lance is a really good player as well. He's also from a relatively small school, but he's big, he's physical. He's going to be good in the NFL. He could take a hit and keep going. So those are my 5.
Yeah, when I was talking about Zach Wilson, I wasn't directly comparing to Patrick Mahomes. It was more of just like some of the skills that Mahomes like has. I would say maybe like a discount version, which would still be phenomenal. But again, Trevor Lawrence, and I'm not much of a college football connoisseur, but I really hope that he turns out to what everyone is saying he's going to turn out as, like the greatest quarterback ever. People have already said he's going to have a better career than Tom Brady in some sources. So I really hope that like he really can shine in Jacksonville. But I think he's number 1. I still think Zach Wilson's going to be number 2. I think he's going to be, even though that everyone's been on the hype train about him, I just think the intangibles are there, as a solid, running around outside the pocket. He's elusive. He's good on his feet. He's a lot of good, fundamentals. I think Justin Fields can still be a number 3, depending on the system he can end up as. We've seen him struggle against some of the better defenses in like the college football playoff, but he's got that pinpoint accuracy, which I think goes a long way in the NFL. Number 4, I like Trey Lance, and he has a cannon for an arm. And what the quarterback here reminds me of is sort of a Josh Allen, where he's a very raw, college quarterback that just loves to fling it. And we saw Josh Allen, it took a couple of seasons to get to that zone he's in now. And if Trey Lance can go on that same trajectory, I think he could have a great career in the NFL. Number 5, I still think Mac Jones. I'm not completely sold on him just because that offense was just so beyond unbelievable at Alabama. We saw, Devontae Smith, all these, superstars that are going to be great in the NFL. I just don't see it personally right now. If he ends up in a San Francisco where he become assistant quarterback, he can deliver the ball down the field. He had, I think, 40 touchdowns last year. So if he can really just convert on his opportunities, he could still be a great quarterback. But I think those are my top 5 at this point.
Both solid lists from you guys. For me, obviously, Trevor Lawrence, number 1. If you don't have Trevor Lawrence, number 1, then you obviously have never watched a game of football before. I think Trevor Lawrence, number 1. I've always liked Justin Fields, so I'll put Fields at 2, and I'll put Wilson at 3, and then I'll throw Trey Lance at 4, and then I'll put Mac Jones at 5. Just because, like you mentioned, Jonathan, that Alabama offense, that's the one thing with Alabama quarterbacks. You don't really know how they're going to work out just because they have the best talent in the country around them on offense. So that's definitely my top 5 list. But guys, one last question here. We're going to take a look at the other New York team, Giants. So very quickly, since we are running out of time, but they pick at number 11. Who do you see the Giants taking with that number 11 pick?
I think there's a couple avenues that the Giants could go down, and I think there's a couple of right answers. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 wrong answers, but in my opinion, I think despite adding Kenny Golladay and the offense is retooled, if you add a Jalen Waddle out of like Alabama, who we've seen shine, and he is just, such a deep vertical threat, I think that really complete the offensive tools that Daniel Jones is going to use. And he's just almost like a player that he could rely on, if he needs to get a first down, running a slant or going for the deep ball. I just think Jalen Waddle will be a good fit for the Giants, but there's a couple good linemen there, a couple good linebackers, but I really think the Giants really can't go wrong with this pick, to be honest.
Well, for me, I do like your take, but I think the Giants got to go O-line. I mean, they're going to want a good run game. They also are going to want to protect Daniel Jones. And there was one mock draft that I was looking at, and they said that Penny Sewell was going to be picked by the Giants. And I can't see Penny Sewell leaving the top 6 of this draft. That guy is an elite talent. I know he sat out last year, but he's such a good O-lineman. But the O-lineman I think that they're going to take is Rashawn Slater. And he's from Northwestern. He's only a junior, but I think that's fine with a lineman. If you look at him, he's huge. Well, he's actually not as big as other linemen are. He's 6'3", 305. But I think he's going to be fine in the NFL. I mean, I've watched him a lot because I've just been intrigued by him, and he's just so strong, so powerful. And I think he'll be a good fit for the Giants as well because, like I said, they could draft a receiver, but the receiving core is all right. They got Kenny Golladay. They have players like Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram at tight end. And I think that O-line, if they can get an O-lineman and really, really bolster this O-line, they're going to have a good run game, which then will lead to a good passing game. So I would like to see them get a guy like Rashawn Slater.
Jonathan, you kind of read my mind a little bit. I also thought Jalen Waddle. I think that they definitely need to upgrade that passing game a little bit more, even though because Daniel Jones is improving more. But I definitely think a solid pick there from you too, Louie. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this show. So for my panel and Jonathan Heite and Louie Pasculli, I'm your host, Liam Plate. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.